a lot of people are struggling with, I guess, feelings of lack of hope and so on in the lockdown. So I thought I'd read you something truly depressing just to start us off. Here it is. This is a British atheist philosopher called Julian Baggini. And he says, atheists have tried to change the image of atheism to something positive and warm and cheerful and bright. But he says that's trying too hard. He says, life without God can be meaningful and moral and happy, but that's can, not is, or even should usually be. And that means it can just as easily be meaningless, nihilistic, that means nothing, nothing matters, nothing good, nothing important, and miserable. And he says, atheists have to live with the knowledge that there is no salvation, no redemption, no second chances. Lives go terribly wrong in ways that can never be put right. Sometimes life is bleep, and that's all there is to it. There's not much bright about that fact, he says. The reason to be an atheist is not that it makes us feel better or gives us a more rewarding life, but because there is no God, and we would rather live in full recognition of that, accepting the consequences, even if it makes us less happy. The more brutal facts of life are harsher for us than they are for those who have a story to tell in which it all works out right in the end. I'm one of those people that has a story to tell in which it all works out right in the end. I'm not going to pretend that life has always been peaches and, cricket in the backyard. It hasn't. But did you hear that? Atheism makes us less happy. And the brutal facts of life are harsher for those of us who don't believe than for those who do, with a story that it all works out right in the end. I read that, and I just felt really encouraged by what that honest atheist has said. God bless him. God bless that atheist. Thank God for that atheist. I remember being a kid, I used to go skiing with my favorite crazy uncle, and we'd be down at the snow, and there was a kind of a hot tub out on the back porch. Every night you'd take your sore legs down and just sit in the hot tub, and you'd feel fantastic. And then you'd get a bit hot and you'd think, and someone would say, hey, let's go out and roll in the snow. So you'd go out and roll in the snow, and within about 20 seconds, your whole body would be freezing and tingling, and you realized, if I stay here for about another minute, I'm going to freeze. I'm going to get hypothermia. I'm in big trouble. And you'd, with relief, jump back into the hot tub and go, oh, I survived. And about half an hour later, you'd do it all again. And that's how I feel when I read that quote. Because I'm sitting here in the hot tub of God's love. I don't just think, I know with all my heart and with about 20 years of research that there is a God. And I know that he loves me. I know that he does. And I'm sitting there, and I know that I've given my life to Jesus as much as a foolish and sinful person can. I believe in the death of Jesus being for me. And so I know that one day when I have a heart attack or get hit by a Volvo or die of some other means, I'm going to get an eternity of bliss in the presence of some of the nicest people who have ever lived. Forever. It's going to be in a place of indescribable happiness. That's how my story is going to end. I know that. It's not because I'm such a wonderful person, because I know that I'm a pretty ordinary human with pretty ordinary faults, but I know this wonderful God. And I'm sitting here in my hot tub. And sometimes I just love to read quotes like that, because it's like going out and rolling in the freezing cold snow. If I believed that, if I really tried to run my life based on that stuff, I don't know how they do it. And I say this with absolute respect for some very dear friends who are atheists. I don't know how you live with that. It makes you a big orphan. It makes you someone with no invisible means of support. I would never criticize an atheist. I would never try to be insensitive or mock them, because that's like kicking an orphan. And so often when I hear the atheist philosophers being honest with one another, or with us, it sounds like to me like depression. It sounds to me like not a very healthy mental state that actually produces. Let me read you one more. Philip Adams is an atheist that I love. He's on Radio National on the late night live show. He's 80 years old now, actually. I've been a fan of his for years. And he poo-hoos the whole idea. But he says, I believe and always have believed that life is totally meaningless. hang on a second. Sit with that. What if I said to you, your life is totally meaningless, you pathetic little person? There's no point in all the nonsense that you go on with. The world doesn't care about your happiness or what it is you do for work or all the stupid things you do in your spare time. And when you die, you're gone. The world won't remember you for one day. That's it. Your life is meaningless. It's pointless. Man, that's the language of depression. That's the language of depression. Massive contrast to Jesus saying he even sees when a sparrow falls and that all the hairs of our head are numbered. That's a favorite text of mine for reasons that you can imagine. But Jesus numbers the hairs on our heads. He knows how many you've got. It's about 20,000, by the way, if you're lucky enough. Dennis and I, closer approaching zero, although counting eyebrows. I'll count eyebrows. But, and we won't talk about ear hair because that's just cringy and embarrassing. In fact, Dennis, why did I even say that? But what we've got here is life is totally meaningless and we have no destiny, no purpose, no author. We just are for a while anyway, and then we aren't. And he says, we're about as significant as the 8 billion grain of sand in the Sahara Desert, our little planet. No one cares. And he says, but he's honest at the end. He said, most atheists don't come to this conclusion happily. I can assure you that most atheists, in my experience, do not happily embrace that black hole. They'd rather like there to be a father and a purpose and a meaning and a destiny. Are you rolling in the snow with me there? That's freezing. There's no big kind dad up there in the sky. Call it mum if you like, because Jesus talks about God as a mother hen and things like that. I have no problem, whichever parent you want to talk about. But this big kind father there in this, whose big smiling face is behind the universe, looking at your life with love and longing and waiting to see you face to face and talk to you and making as much contact with you as he can now through his kindness, through the sunshine, through his word, through other kind people, trying to reach out to you as much as he can and go, hey, I'm here, love you, want to know you, care about how you're going today. Imagine living without that. They'd rather like there to be a father and a purpose and a meaning and a destiny. Wouldn't we all? Aren't those the things that make life worth bothering about? And yet atheism completely doesn't offer you that. I do not know how people get up in the morning if they don't have the hope that I have in Christ. And the mission of my life, whatever way we earn a living, the mission of just about every Christian I know is, number one, to celebrate that hope for themselves and just go, man, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I've got that. And number two, to hand it on to others, to know God and to make him known. There could be no more important way to spend your life. I don't care if you earn your living as a brickie or a baker or a barrister. Ultimately, you're an evangelist, clothed in that kind of clothes. And I can't resist throwing at you one more reason. Last week we discussed a few reasons why a thoughtful person can believe in God. I just want to try one more on you, and I'll give you a warning. It's one of the toughest. So let me see if I can make it make sense. And at the end, I'm going to ask you to give me a thumb. If you got it, give me a thumb. If you kind of got it, give me one of those. And if no, give me one of those. Okay? Is that a deal? Give me a thumb if that's a deal. Okay, thank you. Catherine was first. She was quick draw on the thumb. That's good. It must be a sign of optimism. All right, so here we go. I want to talk about your mind. I want to talk about your thinking. And before we do, there are two stories of how the universe got here, right? Number one is what you see in the credits of the Big Bang Theory, that show, right? There's a Big Bang, then the planets form, then life somehow forms the first cell. We don't know how that happened, by the way. Then evolution happens and we get more and more complex cells. And then suddenly humans get this consciousness because it helps us survive. And the consciousness gets better and better and better. It starts in lower animals, gets better and better and better. And that's it. But all of that happens because of the movement of molecules. That's all. It's just bits of chemistry fizzing around the universe by luck. And they happen to form planets. And then they happen to form the first cell. And they happen to get more and more complex. All by luck. All by chemicals moving, just by the laws of physics and chemistry. That's it. There's no designer. There's nothing outside of matter. There's only matter. So everything is just matter. You don't have a soul, you just have a brain. And it's incredible, your brain's incredible, but you don't have any kind of soul you are just your brain. Everything that happens to you is just your brain doing some clever thing that we don't fully understand, but it's all happened by luck. Okay, that's story number one. That matches atheism. Story number two, you already know. There was an eternal mind out there, and he wasn't just brilliant, he was loving. And so he wanted kids. He wanted a whole lot of people, free, interesting, colorful, lovable beings. And so he made us. And if that story is true, then science is fantastic. Science can explain a lot about us, but not everything. Physics can't explain you alone because you actually have a soul. And there are some things about your mind and your soul that cannot be explained by any scientist. Okay, so those are the two different stories. Well, which one is true? I want to just ask the question, are you just your brain? Are you just your brain? And I'm going to suggest to you that you are more than that. You actually have a spirit or a soul or a self. Some religions call it just a self. I think the Buddhists call it a higher self. Okay, and I would agree with them to that degree, that you have a higher self that is beyond your body. I disagree with them on a lot of other things, let's be honest. And we kind of get clues at this from your thinking. See, I can kind of tell that you're thinking. If I'm an ambulance officer and I come running into your house and I look at you, I can see how conscious you are. I have a thing called the Glasgow coma scale where I can work out how conscious you are. You're only barely conscious or you're very conscious, and they do tests on you, but you can fake it. And I can't really see what's going on in your head. You might be looking at me now and going, man, this is boring. When's lunch? Okay, I can't tell. Or you might be going, wow, this is really interesting. I can't pick it. And that's pretty normal. In fact, if I got the most sophisticated scanner in the world in some hospital and put you through it, I might be able to, doctors would be able to tell which parts of your brain are active and which are burning sugars and which ones are electrically buzzing around, but they can't really tell what you're thinking. They have no idea what is the contents of your thoughts. That's private. And that seems to be beyond the reach of science. It feels like we may never know what's inside a human's head. And that's an interesting clue, because if physics is all you are, if you're just bits of chemistry whizzing around, then why can't we analyze it? Why can't we work out exactly what's going on? If we knew what bits were fizzing and what they were doing, we should be able to know what you're thinking, but we can't. And that suggests that there's two parts to you. There's the physical part and there's a spiritual part as well. So, okay, is your mind just your brain? I'm going to go 7 reasons why it's not. Number 1, if you looked at a photo of me as a primary school kid and me now, I can tell you which one looks better, but they're still the same person. They're still the same person. And yet I'm the same me all through those years. And yet in that time, every cell in my body has been changed. Every time I eat, I'm creating new cells out of the food, and old cells are sloughing off and going away. And so, including my brain, I don't have the same brain cells I had when I was a kid. They change every few years. In other words, if you want to put it in computer terms, all my hardware has gone. I've got new hardware, but I've got the same software. And so what is that software? I'm going to argue that that software is the human spirit, the human soul. It's something that God gave us. And that you know that because you're not the same person you were a year ago or 20 years ago, but you're still the same person. You don't have the same cells, but you still have the same something or other software, and that software is your spirit. Second one, the unity of yourself across the brain. Right now, your brain is doing so many things, it's incredible. Hopefully, part of it is listening to me. Hopefully, that's worth doing. But I bet other parts of it are thinking, I know exactly where my foot is right now. Oh, I feel really comfortable in this lounge. Or my legs are a bit twitchy and I can't wait to go for a walk later. There's a whole lot of things going through your consciousness. Or, oh, what's that smell? That's great. Is that lunch cooking? Or, a whole lot of things are going on. And your brain is also organizing your digestion and your breathing. You probably weren't thinking about your breathing until I mentioned it. Your brain's just doing all that stuff for you. Okay. But even though your brain is doing about 100 things at any one time, something pulls all that together and just organizes it all. And the neuroscientists don't know which part of your brain does that. There is no part of your brain that actually does that. And so they say, that's probably another part of you. That's yourself that does that. That's yourself. What the heck is yourself? it's your spirit, it's your soul, it's your little godlike part. And these two famous scientists wrote a book called The Self and Its Brain, and they say that you use your brain like a pianist uses a piano. Your brain is a wonderful thing, but you play it. What's you? Well, you. That's something different from your brain. There's a third reason we know that we're not just our brain, and that is free will. Now, I think most people know that we have free will, at least some kind of free will. You can either do what, eat the beans that your mother told you to eat, or not eat the beans. Okay, you have a free choice in a whole lot of things. Not everything, but a lot of things. Now, think about this. If you're just a brain made of cells, cells can't decide things. Cells only respond to stimulus from chemistry or electricity. They don't initiate things. They don't think up things. They don't do things. And so there's no way that a bunch of cells could give you free will. Free will, I believe, only comes from something beyond the brain, and that is you, your spirit. Fourthly, as I said before, what's going on in your brain is not necessarily what's going on in your mind. Let me try an experiment on you, okay? Can you please imagine a pink elephant? Okay, please, in your mind, see a pink elephant. Have you got it? Can you see it? You're thinking of a pink elephant. All right. You think I'm nuts. Okay, fine. But just think of this pink elephant. If I got the most sophisticated scanner that we have, or if I even poked around physically in your brain, if I were a brain surgeon, nowhere in your brain would there be a pink elephant or a picture of a pink elephant. It's not in there. We can't find the picture of the pink elephant, but it's in your mind. And so your brain and your mind must be different. Hope that makes sense. The fifth one is really obvious. Your brain is a physical object that takes up space, but your mind is not. For example, please imagine a pie. Please think of let's say a nice nut meat pie. Okay, you got it? Now think of 2 nut meat pies. Now think of 10 nut meat pies. Did your weight increase? No, it didn't. Your weight didn't increase when you thought of 10 nut meat pies, but it would if you ate them. Ask me how I know. And so there's something, your brain is a physical object, but your mind is not. You can put as many nut meat pies in your mind as you want to, and it won't affect the weight of your brain. You know what I'm saying? So they're two different things. They're two different things. Now, here's a really wild one. I want number 6. Why do you trust your thoughts? Why do you trust your thoughts? I love this because if your thoughts are just the product of a brain, and that brain is just following the laws of physics and chemistry with a whole lot of random particles fizzing around in there, why would you trust anything it said? If it's entirely random, why would you trust it? Let me put it to you this way. Let's say we jump on a train together, and we're sitting in a train, and we look out the window, and we see up on a mountainside, there's a whole lot of white rocks that have been put together, and they form a sign, and it says, "Welcome to Wales." Where would you think we were? Duh, you'd think we were in Wales, right? We just gotten into Wales. But let's imagine that a lady on the train says, "Oh, those rocks weren't there yesterday. In fact, I was driving past this morning, and would you like to see my mobile phone footage? Because here's some footage. Here's some footage of those rocks actually falling down the hill completely by random. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Those rocks came flying down the hill by random, kind of a landslide, and just by luck, they formed the sign, "Welcome to Wales." That's incredibly lucky, isn't it? Look, here it is on my phone, and she shows you. And you go, "Whoa, that's very unlikely, but okay, I believe you because I've seen it." But where would you think you were? Would you think you were in Wales? No, you could be anywhere. You wouldn't trust the result of that random process. It wouldn't be telling you anything. It would just be luck. You might be in Queensland, and that had happened. And it's the same with your brain. Why would you trust what your brain says? Even atheist philosophers say that, by the way. There's a guy called William Nagel, atheist philosopher. He says, evolutionary naturalism provides an account of our capacities, our brain, that undermines their reliability, and in so doing undermines itself. What he's saying is, story 1 that we got here by evolution, that story gives you a brain that shouldn't be reliable. Your brain shouldn't work reliably if that story is true. And an atheist is saying that. Your brain shouldn't be reliable if the evolution story is true. That's what he said. Let me read it to you in C.S. Lewis's words. He says it even better. Supposing there was no intelligence behind the universe, no creative mind. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. It's merely that when the atoms inside my skull happen, for physical or chemical reasons, to arrange themselves in a certain way, like rocks spelling out a sign, welcome to Wales, this gives me as a byproduct the sensation I call thought. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? It's like upsetting a milk jug and hoping that the way it splashes will give you a map of London. But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism. And therefore I have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought. So I can never use thought to disbelieve God. Hey. So what we're saying is, there's a whole bunch of reasons to say that you are more than just a physical brain following the laws of physics and chemistry. You have much more than that going on in your head. You're a soul. You're a spirit. You are a child of God in that way, because God is spirit. Jesus said, God is spirit, and those that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay. So there's a little piece of the image of God in each one of us. And that's the most incredible compliment to a human being. That's the most incredible source of hope. You have godlike things like free will. You are actually able to choose. You have reason. You have the ability to see if something's true or false. You have the ability to love and to care for others. And you have the ability to love in a disciplined way, even if you don't feel like it. You have the ability to say, no, this is right. This is what I should do. And I think those are incredible gifts. I would be very depressed if I didn't have those things. And okay, so how do we do? Did you get that? Did you vaguely get that? Or was it completely obscure? You got a thumb? You can be honest, okay? I won't cry. I've got mainly thumbs, and the other people have got their screens off. I don't know, but that's okay. Oh, there's a thumb from, good on you, Davies family. I can see a yellow thumb popping up on your screen. Okay, all right. Look, hopefully that made some sense. All I'm really trying to say to you is this. Christianity is not just a matter of faith. There are very, very good reasons why we can actually believe that there is a God and that we are his children and that he cares about us. That's all I'm really trying. If what I've said actually made no sense, that's what I'm really trying to say. There are good reasons for the faith that we have. And just quickly, I'd like us to look at since we're talking about some of the depressing aspects of lockdown, I'd just like us to have a quick look at a very depressing psalm in the Bible, and say, what's that doing there? Before we do, I guess I wouldn't be the only person in this virtual room who has ever had a depressing moment in their life, or a tough time, or a rubbish kind of period. I'm sure that we all do. You know, it's in relationships, it's in health, it's in our jobs, it's in all kinds of ways that life can be pretty tough. And interestingly, when believers have those things happen to them, sometimes they don't know what to do with it. Because if you're depressed about something, it sounds to be against Jesus, who wants us to be happy. I've come that you might have life more abundant. If we're anxious and worried about something that's going on, well, Paul says, don't be anxious for anything. Jesus says, don't worry about your life. The birds don't worry about things. Why would you worry? And we can kind of think, oh, I'm not a very good Christian if I'm feeling like this. And that can only add to the burden that we already carry. What I'd like to do today is to say, it is possible to bring that kind of feeling and that kind of experience to God, and to do that in a way that is in worship. But it's often tough in formal worship. Most of the songs we sing are not laments, they're happy. And we heard a beautiful praise song this morning, thanking God for great stuff, that even in depressing times, we still have those great things. Only about 20% of our hymns and less than 5% of contemporary Christian worship songs ever mention hardship or lament. And yet in the Bible, 1/3 of the Psalms seem to mention it. If you open the Psalms and count them up, I actually did this, about 1/3 of them, about 50 of the 150 are Psalms describing sad experiences. And yet you often don't hear them preached even at funerals. because funerals have got to be upbeat. They've got to be a celebration of life. And sure, that's good. The Christian can celebrate the life and the life to come. But oftentimes a funeral is a great place to have a good old cry and to take it to Jesus, just as Mary and Martha did. I'm going to suggest that a lot of people carry heavy loads. I'm thinking of young people at the moment. Everyday pressure to succeed. Am I going to be okay? Dating, friendships, self-identity, parents. By 18, about half of them will have been through a major crisis. Hospitalization, going to court, serious conflict, parental divorce, parental remarriage, pregnancy, abortion, STD, rape, suicide attempt, accident, failing a subject, being fired from a job. Young people go through horrible stuff as much as us who wish we were young. How do we take that to God? How do we make that part of our worship? Sometimes Christians seem to find laments a bit threatening. Maybe we like to think that we're in control or that life's going to be fantastic all the time. Maybe other people and their burdens, we don't want them getting in the way of our worship time. But I think so many of the Psalms in the Bible describe people who are sick, discouraged, poor, powerless, hurt, worried, guilty, regretful, bogged down, submerged, and drowning. That I think that's trying to tell us it doesn't mean God's forgotten you if you're going through that patch. In fact, one of the Psalms says God is near to the brokenhearted. He's close to people who are going through those hard times. And I'd like to just, I want us to look at one of those Psalms in just a second. It's Psalm number 69, and it's kind of long, but let me just read it to you, and I'll try to land the plane before 12. Psalm 69. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. Wow, that's a dramatic opening. Here's someone who's nearly drowning. The waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mud where there is no standing. I've come into deep waters where the floods overflow me. I'm weary with my crying. My throat is dry. My eyes fail while I wait for my God. And those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. I love that text too. Maybe that's why I chose this psalm. But he's saying, I've got more enemies than I've got hair. They are mighty who want to destroy me, and they're my enemies wrongfully. I haven't stolen something and I have to return it. God, you know my foolishness, and my sins are not hidden from you. Wow. So what's he doing there? Let's try and break up and analyze what's going on. The first one is what they call just the invitation, or the help me statement at the beginning. Help! Okay, that's part one. And then there's an actual specific plea for help. A whole lot of people hate me and I'm really discouraged. That's what the problem is in this psalm. There's a specific complaint, and he kind of tells you what that is. There's also a confession of sin. Look at verse 5. God, you know my foolishness. That's really important, because whoever's written this psalm is not trying to tell you that, or God, that they're perfect. David is not trying to say, oh, I'm a perfect man. Why is all this hardship happening to me? He's actually saying, I'm an idiot. I'm a sinner. I've contributed to my own mess. And you know the great news coming out of that? If you hear nothing else today from me, hear this. If you've contributed to your own mess, God still loves you. God has grace and redemption and forgiveness and lift and encouragement for you, even if you're part of the problem, even if you're partly to blame. Be honest about that with God. Tell him, and there it is. It's okay. Then he says, let not those who wait on you, O Lord of hosts, be ashamed because of me. Don't let people who seek you be confused because of me, O God of Israel, because for your sake I have borne reproach. Shame has covered my face. I've become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's children, because zeal for your house has eaten me up, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. And then he talks about how people are mocking him and bagging him, and even drunk people are singing about him, gossiping about him in verse 12. All the people in the marketplace are gossiping, and I'm the song of the drunkards. People, when they get drunk and they sing songs, they make mocking songs about me, says David. Man, that's pretty tough. It's pretty humiliating. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, in the acceptable time. Okay, they can say what they want, but I'm actually coming back to you, God. In the middle of all this flak storm, all this nonsense, I'm coming back to you. My prayer is to you at the right time. O God, in the multitude of your mercy, hear me in the truth of your salvation. Deliver me out of the mud and don't let me sink. Let me be delivered from those who hate me, and out of the deep waters. Don't let the flood waters overflow me. Don't let the deep swallow me up, and don't let the pit, the grave, shut its mouth on me. It's kind of pretty good writing, isn't it? The grave, death, is like this big thing that's about to go and just chomp on David. He's going, don't let that happen, please. Like, this is a man really struggling with sadness and stress and the big issues of life, and he's actually fighting those things with the help of God, and he's bringing them to God. Hear me, O Lord, because your loving kindness is good. I love that. In the middle of all this stuff going on, he just goes somewhere quiet and he just reminds himself, God's still good. God's still good. It's okay. Hear me, God, because your loving kindness is good. I can't tell you what a beautiful word that loving kindness is. Loving kindness. Even in English, it's wonderful. Loving kindness. That's the word best to describe God. But in Hebrew, it's even prettier. It actually means loyalty. Loyalty beyond death. It means commitment to just look after you and care for you no matter what happens. It's the strongest word for love and loyalty and kindness. And David's saying that's what God's got for every one of us. That's what God's got for you. Turn to me according to the multitude of your tender mercies, and do not hide your face from your servant, for I am in trouble. Hear me speedily. What he's saying is, God, please don't be a stranger. Please don't go anywhere. I really need your face to look at me. I really need that big, kind face. You know, may the Lord's face shine upon you, Moses says. I really need to have a sense of your personal presence in my life. That's what he's asking for. Then he says, verse 19, you know my reproach, my shame and my honor. My adversaries are all before you. Reproach has broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. I looked for someone to take pity, but there was nobody. I looked for comforters, but I found no one. That's the experience of a depressed person, isn't it? That loneliness. When you go through that rubbish patch of your life, you can just feel like, man, it's only you. You're just some poor old seagull on a rock in a massive sea of loneliness. And that's a common experience. If you've ever felt that, you're actually not alone in feeling loneliness. That's what every person in this kind of a situation feels. I looked for someone to take pity, and there was nobody. When Handel wrote The Messiah, he took that beautiful piece of scripture and he applied it to Jesus on the cross. I looked for someone to have pity on me. There was nobody. I looked for comforters, didn't find any. Your rebuke has broken my heart. I'm full of heaviness. That's how Jesus felt in his dying moments. And then, listen to this. He actually starts to talk about his enemies. Let their table become a snare before them, and their well-being a trap. Let their eyes be darkened that they cannot see. Make their loins shake continually. Pour out your indignation on them, and let your wrathful anger take hold of them. Can you hear the anger now? He's been really depressed and sad. Now he's getting really quite grumpy. And they talk about the emotions, that all different mix of emotions that you'll go through in a crisis. It's like the waves of the sea. Bang, you get hit from this. Bang, and then you feel that. But now he's really quite ticked at his enemies, at the people who've done this to him. Let their dwelling place be desolate. Let their homes be empty. Let no one live in their tents, because they persecute people. They talk of the grief of those who are wounded. Add iniquity to their iniquity. Let them not come into your righteousness. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. Woo! That doesn't sound very Christian, does it? Is that how I'm meant to pray about my enemies? It's not. That might be our example, not in what it says, but in the fact that it brings those ugly emotions to God. It brings those ugly emotions to God. David there is getting grumpy at his enemies. And in a way, that's fair enough. Because if you look at the way that Saul, for example, treated David, that may be who he has in mind. He's going, God, Saul's turned his back on you. He's clearly turned away from your prophets. He's done horrendous stuff. Judge him. But you know the good thing about that? David's not trying to do it himself. He's not trying to take vengeance himself. He's leaving that to God. David could have taken vengeance. He had a bunch of times when he could have killed Saul that he refuses to, because he says, I'm going to leave you to God, sunshine, because God's bigger and stronger even than I and my boys in the army are, and he'll take better vengeance. It's kind of a strange thought, isn't it? But David is saying there, judge them. Judge them. And I think we have the right to do that as believers. We have the right to say, God, you be the judge. You be the judge. And if there's any vengeance needs taking at the end of the world, you take it. And God will. Paul says, leave space for God's wrath, because God says, vengeance is mine, and I will repay. And there's a place there in which, this is really a separate topic. I might do it another day, but there's the way that he talks about his enemies there, he's actually handing them to God, the judge, and saying, you have them, you sort them out, I'm not going to. And that's kind of a dark and scary side of it, but it's true. God will, at the end of the world, judge people and hold them accountable for the way that they've treated others. And David's okay with that. Not because he's perfect. He's not going into the judgment saying, oh, my works are good enough. I'm great. I'll pass. I'll get at least 51% in the judgment because I'm such a good bloke. No, he's already admitted that he's a fool in verse 5. He's already admitted that he sinned. Same verse. He's going into the judgment confident because he has a forgiver. He has a forgiver in God. He has a merciful and gracious God, and he's asked for forgiveness and he's repented. And I think that's the difference. Just quickly, let's finish it. I'm poor and sorrowful. Let your salvation, O God, set me up on high. I will praise the name of God with a song, and I'll magnify him with thanksgiving. Oh, he's feeling good again now. His emotions have kind of bounced up a bit, and he's ready to sing. Hand him a guitar, somebody, because he's going to actually make God look really good. And this will please the Lord better than an ox or a bull, because, look at verse 32, humble people will see this and be glad. And you who seek God, your hearts will live. What's he trying to do? He's trying to encourage others. If you're struggling, if you're a bit low to the ground, if you're a bit feeling a bit humble, a bit beaten up, this is for you, he's saying. He's going, why? The reason I'm writing this is I want to encourage other people. I've been through this process of grief and loss and pain and discouragement, and I found that God pulled me through it. Didn't take it away, but got me through it. And by the way, I want humble people, ordinary people with ordinary struggles to know that God is good. That's what he's saying. For the Lord hears the poor and does not despise his prisoners. And then he gets into praise. Let heaven and earth praise him, the sea and everything that moves in them. God will save Zion and build the cities of Judah, and the descendants of his servants will inherit it, and those who love his name will dwell in it. He's thinking about heaven there. He's got a view of this beautiful city that God builds, and that's how our story ends. That's a very quick introduction to that psalm, but there's a few things there. You can see there a wide range of emotions. This is not just a calm doctrinal Bible study about, the Trinity or something. It's a full-on roller coaster ride of experience. Bang! Gossip and nastiness and depression and threat and fear of death and that's David's life. That's how it was. And yet through all of that, he can come to God and express those things. I need to close, but I want to tell you just quickly a couple of things. There's a guy called Walter Brueggemann who writes a lot on the Psalms, and he's a really interesting writer. And he says there are kind of three different kinds of Psalms. There are the Psalms that he calls Psalms of orientation, and they tell you how life is. They say basically, I'll put it in my terms, don't smoke and you'll be healthy. That's what they say. Don't smoke and you'll be healthy. Is that true? Yeah, it is. Kind of, but it's a bit simple. And then there are Psalms of disorientation, where all the bad stuff happens to you, and you're a believer, and you're going, what's going on? I thought my life was meant to be good from following Jesus. All this rubbish is happening. What's going on, God? And there are plenty of Psalms that talk to God like that. What are you doing? Why are you letting this? Why have you forsaken me? And then he says there are Psalms of new orientation. When you've been through a crisis, you come out the other end and you actually give this really clear, balanced message where you say, yeah, life can be tough, but God is good. And it's not simple anymore. It's not simplistic. It's not like you could say that to a kid. Oh, life can be really, really tough, but God is still good. They wouldn't get it. Well, some have, but most wouldn't have been through the hardship that David has. But someone who has been through it can turn around and say, for example, cancer. Yeah, I went through cancer. It was really tough, but God stayed with me, and here I am. And you can insert all kinds of different other issues that people go through. But that's what David is trying to achieve. Can I say one more thing? To be honest with you, whenever I've hit a bit of a crisis, I guess my first thought sometimes is to complain at God. Why have you? And then you kind of think, actually, that's not fair. And then you complain to God. Then you think, actually, even that's a bit rough. And you realize that you're actually complaining with God. You're actually lamenting with God, because he didn't want any of that stuff to happen either. And he's just as sad as you are about it. And I guess that's been my own kind of experience in you kind of, and some of the Psalms I think show the same thing. Sometimes they're really ranty. They're at God. Why do you let the why? They often start with a why. Why? And then they kind of calm down and they're talking to God. And then you see in a lot of David's work that heart where he's just so intimate with a kind father that he actually realizes God hates it too. And he realizes that everything he says, God is up there going, yeah, that's true. I hate that. I hate that that's happened. And he understands that God is in absolute sympathy with him and with his life. And I guess, look, I just wanted to mention these Psalms. I've barely given you a nodding introduction to them, but I just wanted to say there's a lot of Psalms in there, and they're a great resource. If you or someone you know is going through a crisis, first of all, you're not alone. These giants of faith in the past did. And look at how they coped. They did the roller coaster, but they hung on and they kept their faith in God. And what a massive resource that is. What if you didn't have it? What if you didn't have a kind father? Man, oh man, it would be so tough. But you and I do. In fact, I believe everyone does. I believe the atheists do as well. We've just got to give them a reason to know that. Just got to give them intellectual permission to open up their hearts in trust to a kind and loving Father who wants to give them an eternity of bliss, wants to surprise their socks off with how good he is and how good life can be now and also into eternity. And I think what you and I have in Jesus is the most precious thing in the world. It's bulletproof. No one can take it away from you. And it's I just say, hang on to it. Rate it for what it really is. It's fantastic. And by God's grace, let's this week try to find a way to hand it on to others as well. Shall we pray? Father, I ask for a relationship with you that is just as honest as David's was, so that each of us could come to you and say, here's what's really going on. Here's what I'm struggling with. Here's how I think I've messed it up. Here's the help I need. And know that you love to hear us talk to you like that. You're just like, yes, all right, I can deal with that. I pray that each of us would have that honesty and intimacy in our friendship with you, and that we would know that we're safe to do that, because we don't have to impress you. We don't have to pretend to be somebody or act like everything's all good. We can just put it out there and let you know what's going on in our hearts, good and bad, and trust that you are working on a plan to help us and to fix it. And how good is that? We'd be lost without that good news. Obviously, it was demonstrated most on the cross, where you prepared to give up your own life even to show your love and to take our guilt and our worry and our burdens away, and to lay on you the iniquity of us all. Please could that encourage us to know how much you love us. And if you've done that, if you're happy to give us your own son, how much more would you just freely give us anything else that we need? And we pray that we would be those who can encourage, as David wanted to encourage other humble people, other struggling people, and that you would use us to do that for Christ's sake. Amen.